And welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. The political landscape of America is changing, and socialism is rearing its head in a more profound way than any other previous time in our history. Conservatism is being redefined, and the Bible, if even referenced, is no longer the foundation upon which America is built. Here to talk about what's going on in America today is Joe Newby of ConservativeFiringLine.com. Joe is a 10-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps who wrote for Examiner.com for 6 years. His articles have also appeared at Newsbusters, Spokane Faith and Values, and other conservative sites. He currently runs the Conservative Firing Line, where he discusses issues important to conservatives. He's the co-author of Banned, How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad, and appears here on Revealing the Truth on the first Monday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour. Here to bring us up to date on America Gone Wild is Joe Newby. Joe, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Eric. It's great to see you. Good. Always great to see you.
Here we are. We're wrapping up 4 years of programming together, Joe, since
Wow.
you first appeared here, and we're getting ready to launch year 5 in January. And you've been a part of the Igniting Nation family since really almost at the very beginning.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, it's been just fantastic. I tell you, it's hard for me to believe that it's already been that long.
It has been, but we've had a good time in exposing the absurdities of what goes on in American politics. And there's nothing more absurd than what's going on in this very moment. And I look to you and the team there at Conservative Firing Line to kind of shed light on the oxymoronic activities of what we call Washington, the federal government, the election system, the COVID-19 crisis du jour, and you can start right at the top and give us some insights as to what you see happening. Is the Supreme Court going to jump into this election and wrangle it back into the hands of what appears to be the rightful winner, but everything indicates that at the state level, the evidence is not getting heard, but will it wind up in the Supreme Court, and will a decision come down in time to affect the outcome of this election?
Well, Eric, I'm afraid that it probably will end up in the Supreme Court. Whether there's an outcome that you and I would like to see, that's a different story. The problem we have is that the evidence, we're talking again about hundreds, if not by this time thousands, of sworn affidavits. We're not just talking about people coming in off the street and saying, hey, I saw this or that. We're talking about affidavits that are sworn under the threat of perjury. Okay. Video, we've seen video. We know for a fact that there have been dead people voting. In one state, for example, I think it was Michigan, there were something like at least 7 people that we know of who were supposedly born before 1903. People who were born in 1850, for example, voted in this election. According to Rudy Giuliani, who is that Smokin' Joe Frazier, voted in Philadelphia. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. We've got video, this damning video that came out of Georgia. We're hearing evidence that there were ballots that were run through the Dominion voting machine multiple times, as many as 10 times. And this, hundreds, if not thousands of ballots were run through this way over and over. we're seeing this kind of evidence from coming in from all over the country, Eric, and we're seeing judge after judge after judge refuse to even allow the cases to be brought forward. Now, grant, I'll grant you that, in my view, Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani have not done, I think, as good a job as they could have in swaying the court of public opinion on this. And I think that's where the problem lies. We are not seeing all of the evidence that Powell and Giuliani and the others say is out there. And I think they need to be a little more proactive, if you will, about bringing some of that stuff forward. Statistically, Eric, the numbers just don't add up. When you compare the numbers that Biden got in some of these swing states and swing counties and swing precincts and so forth, and compare them to what Barack Obama got just 4 years ago, or I'm sorry, not 4 years ago, 8 years ago, it just does not make any sense. Not at all. It seems to me that it would be statistically impossible for Joe Biden to have gotten some of the numbers that he's gotten in some of these areas. Um, there were 7 wards, I think, 7 voting wards in Milwaukee, um, where the number of ballots that came in exceeded the number of voters in that area. Some of them had, for example, a 200% voter turnout. How does that happen? How?
Joe, I saw a report today that they were able to take a Dominion machine and set it up and run a cycle of the same ballots through, I believe it was 10 different times, to calculate how the algorithm was applied.
Right.
And it appeared that 83, regardless of how was recorded on the ballot, 83% of all the ballots cast were tallied as a ballot for Biden.
Right.
Regardless of what the ballot said, the algorithm automatically applied 83% of the total votes. They ran this test 10 times with the same results. So the system, and what they're saying is that each machine is programmed with a different algorithm, which is kind of interesting that you would distribute machines with multiple algorithms, but if they become the property of the state, they've purchased them. I don't know if they leased them or how access was granted to the programming of it. But that alone, 10 cycles of repeated testing where it was 50-50. So the count should have been 50-50. It was 83-17, and it altered the results. That alone is forensically critical evidence that was demonstrated, supervised, hands-off, people feeding the ballots in and calculating the results. But what does that get us?
Well, what that gets us is, in my view anyway, what that gets us is basically nowhere, unfortunately, because even though we can run those tests now, that doesn't necessarily prove that that's exactly what happened. However, when you look at the numbers, like you said, statistically, when you look at the numbers of what was reported by these very machines, and you compare them to this test, it presents a different picture. And whether or not the case can be made, or to be more precise, whether or not a compelling case can be made, the question then comes up: what do we do? What do we do next? Do we order a redo of the vote? Do we dismiss those votes and take the chance of disenfranchising 7 states completely? What do we do? What's the remedy? And to me, Eric, that's the problem. What is the remedy? Um, my concern is this as well, and the Dominion machines are a huge, huge, huge part of this. But there's something else that we need to look at. Um, let's go back to before the election. There was something else. There was something Joe Biden said before the election that gives us a very big clue. Now, you and I, we know that Joe Biden in our audience, they know that Joe Biden is not exactly the most, how can I say it without being too impolitic, articulate. Okay, let's say he's not exactly the most articulate individual when he's not sitting behind staring at a teleprompter. And even when he is looking at a teleprompter, he has a tendency to get his tongue tangled around his eye tooth. You know what I mean? Can't see what he's saying, that kind of thing. But there was something that he said before this election even happened. When he was talking to the voters in Michigan, he told them, first of all, he said he didn't need their votes on election day, but what he needed was for them to support him after the election, remember? And then there was something else that he said. And I don't remember, I don't think it was in that same speech, but he came out and he said that he had the most, to paraphrase, the most or the most intense voter fraud organization. He did use that term, voter fraud organization. He said it was put in place to get Barack Obama elected, and then he said that same. He did not say that had been put into place for Hillary Clinton, and I found that to be very interesting indeed. Well, so we have that. And I can't help but wonder, was Joe Biden actually telling the truth when he said that? Was that a faux pas, or was that what you would call a Freudian slip? Did he let the mask slide just a bit? Now, there's something else to think about. Fraud, if we're going to make the assumption that fraud did in fact take place, and it's looking more and more and more like that's the case, that there was massive fraud in all of these swing states, we have to ask ourselves who paid for it. Because fraud on this level requires money, it requires backing. And what have we found out since the election? Well, we found out that one individual has given up to $400 million in grants in all of these areas where there have been voting irregularities. Millions, for example, in Florida, in Pennsylvania, and other places. And who might that individual be? And it turns out that it's none other than Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, the same CEO of Facebook, which, by the way, has been on a tear against conservative pages, censoring conservatives, censoring Donald Trump from the very beginning. Now, I don't think Jack Dorsey has been involved in that. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to indicate that, but Jack Dorsey has been neck deep in censoring not only the president, but conservatives as well. And, anybody who's been reading my pages or reading my site for any length of time knows that I refer to something called the Silicon Valley axis of evil.
Right.
Okay. And guess who factors into that Silicon Valley axis of evil? Facebook, Twitter, Google, and other big tech outfits. This is why, social media startups like Parler and MeWe and others have started to really take off. In fact, we have a group on MeWe called Hardcore Conservatives, and when the election happened, we had, I think, between 5 to 6,000 members. Since then, our membership has nearly doubled on MeWe. And on Parler, we're growing. I mean, it's incredible the amount of growth that we're seeing on several of these alternate social media sites. Well, something happened about a month before the election. Facebook, I guess, decided that we were engaging in wrong think, to borrow George Orwell, and they decided to tear our page down. Well, they took me off as well. And you know what's happened since then, Eric? It hasn't. It really hasn't. It hasn't affected us all that much. So what that tells me is that Facebook has been engaged in censoring our material for quite some time now. And I find it very interesting that the man behind all of this censorship is also giving money, millions upon millions upon millions of money, to some of these states and local areas where a lot of this voting irregularity, a lot of this alleged fraud has been taking place. And you can't help but wonder, is there a connection?
You mentioned some things that Joe Biden said. There's two other comments that he made that make one wonder what's really going on. One of them was that if he and Kamala Harris were to get into a disagreement, he would just step down and resign as president. The second one was if he were to get sick, he would immediately resign and Kamala Harris would become president. It sounds almost like he is foretelling an agenda. Now, I also saw two pictures of him with a boot on his foot for this supposed broken ankle or broken foot. The two pictures showed the boot on two different legs.
Interesting.
One picture showed it was his right leg. Another picture showed it was his other leg. So there's just, it smacks of meddling. There's Chinese money deeply involved.
Absolutely.
In this, in Georgia, there's Chinese money deeply involved across America. I think China is the third largest property owner in America.
Yep.
I think that the Vatican is the Vatican is the second largest, and the first largest, the United States government.
Right.
So China has quite a stronghold, and it seems that everything that every indication is that Biden is okay with China becoming the premier global world power.
Oh, absolutely. He has been for years. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, Joe Biden has been known as China Joe for a very long time, and and for a very good reason. He was tight with China back during the Obama regime. He was thick as thieves with them during the Obama years. So there's nothing new there. His ties to China have been well known for a very, very long time. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And you know, it, there's another thing to think about too here, Eric. Prior to the election, there were a number of polls that came out. One of the polls asked voters if they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. 56% said yes, they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. I have never in my entire life, Eric, ever known a president with that kind of a record to win an election, or to not win an
Right.
election. I'm sorry. That just that just does not compute in my mind at all. It just does not. The second thing, you have to ask yourself, all the thousands and thousands of people who attended Trump rallies, who waited for hours in bad weather and snowstorms, for crying out loud, risking exposure to COVID, and everything, and they waited in hours just to see President Trump at a rally. And you compare that to Joe Biden's little gatherings, where he might have maybe 20 or 30 cars in a parking lot, honking at him, while he's up on stage telling one lie after another, after another, after another. When I look at that kind of thing, Eric, it just, this is why I think the last time we talked, I mentioned this. It when I saw the response that people have to President Trump, attending his rallies, risking, all kinds of things, okay, and yet they still came out to see him, versus what I saw coming from Joe Biden. It just does not compute in my mind that a president with that kind of support would lose an election. It just doesn't compute in my mind. I've never seen anything like that. I don't. Have you? I
No.
know I haven't.
No. So, what do you predict as the outcome of this? We've got the Electoral College meeting coming up, where the president-elect will, through the Electoral College, the delegates will vote. It was rumored that President Trump was going to meet with the delegates and ask them to change to support him.
Right.
I don't think that went very far.
Well, no, and another thing to keep in mind, I don't think the electors have all been selected in all of these states yet. States are still working through that. There are still legal challenges going on. So I don't think we've even got to that point yet. And then another thing to consider is that a lot of these states have laws against electors being unfaithful. So that's something else that has to be considered. So it's really up to the state legislators to make this happen. Sure, Trump can lobby them all he wants, but a lot of these electors, like I said, they're bound by state law.
Right.
So there's not much that can be done there. If you recall, when Trump was elected, the Democrats and the left and Hollywood and the media did everything they could to try to twist the arms of these electors to get them to vote for Hillary Clinton. I mean, they were even threatening them with violence if they didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I remember writing several articles about some of that was going on. But the fact is, this is in the hands of the state legislatures right now, and it's up to them really to make the determination about what should be done. Eventually, I think this will end up in the Supreme Court, but with the way the Supreme Court has been lately, I don't think we can even hazard a guess as to what could happen. It's very possible the Supreme Court could come down on Trump's side, but again, it's hard to say. So at this point, I think yes, there is a possibility. I think that Trump still could possibly come out ahead in this, but if he does, he's going to face, I think, an even more hostile Democrat Party and an even more hostile media, and certainly a much more hostile left wing, the left wing part of the American population. Um, my greatest concern, Eric, is this. We, I think, are on the cusp of what could very well become a second bloody civil war. If Joe Biden is actually inaugurated and occupies the Oval Office, I think we will see for the first time in American history an illegitimate president being seated as a result of a fraudulent and stolen election. An election which, Newsbusters has come out and said was stolen by big tech and big media. They did a study, I don't know if you've seen this, where they showed that upwards of, I think it was 16 or 17% of Democrat voters were not even aware of the Hunter Biden scandal, had no idea, because the media kept it from them. Big tech kept it from them. Twitter, Facebook kept it from them. Donald Trump himself has been censored by Twitter something like 194 times, somewhere in that neighborhood, while Joe Biden, who lies every time he opens his mouth, has yet to be censored by big tech. So yes, I think that we are on thin ice right now, and I would not be surprised. I mean, either way, no matter how this goes, I think we're going to be in for a very rough 4 years. I really do.
I agree with you, and it's unfortunate because what's going to happen in this is that the legislation of speech, you and I, and especially me as a minister of the gospel will become offensive to the liberal left and will be classified as hate speech, and therefore the church.
Well, it already is, Eric. Seriously, it already is.
Right. It's labeled as it. However, there's no legislation. There's no enactment. I mean, there's the social push. So when you take a look at these inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when you take a look at the First Amendment and the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, when you reclassify that, and they will do everything in their power to reclassify that as to create new categories by executive order of hate speech. Right. And this is like by fiat. This is there's no backing to it, but what the agenda is to reverse all of Trump's executive orders on the first day, and then ask Congress to enact laws to back the executive orders of the Biden administration. This is their publicized agenda, that Trump did not get legislation to support his executive orders, therefore they are reversible. They were never enacted into law. So we have two main issues, and I want to bring these issues up on the other side of break. We're talking with Joe Newby, as we do on the first Monday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour for the Conservative Firing Line. And you can find out more about him at conservativefineline.com. A tremendous group of commentators and conservative biblical worldview opinions that do not line up with mainstream media, but these are free thinkers. They are unbridled and candid free thinkers and a tremendous source of information of investigative reporting. We're going to take a short break, and on the other side, I want to talk about the game plan that's been in place since the 60s, since the 50s, that have been enacted by the Democratic Party, that the Republican Party has never countered in any way, shape, or form in its actions, in its organization, in its deployment, and only rises up when it comes election time. And the votes are won in the non-election. They're building the community during the course of the year, and the Republican Party has never been active and engaged at that level as an organization and as a community as the Democrats have done. So when they want to do mail-in ballots, everybody's all for it. There's no backing. There's no organized Republican backing against it that in the court of public opinion is going to stop those kind of things, and it has to become a new Republican Party. We're going to talk about that on the other side of break. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, and Sean Tabbitt for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitinganation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitinganation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the first Monday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour, we meet with Joe Newby from ConservativeFiringLine.com. Joe, good to have you back.
Good to be back, Eric.
So, Joe, Joe Biden's a devout Catholic that talks to palmists.
Palmists. Yes. No, he reads the palmist.
That's right. He reads the palmist. I've never heard so many claims to devout Catholicism as I've heard in the last 6 or 7 months from Pelosi, from Schumer, from Biden, and they're all pro-abortion. How is that devout Catholicism?
Well, it's not, but then again, I mean, look at what's leading the Catholic Church right now. Okay, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my Catholic brothers and sisters, Eric, but when you have somebody, the head of the church who is known as Red Francis, I mean, what does that tell you?
Right, he's a communist. He's a communist. He is for same-sex union, and he's for multiple paths to heaven.
Right.
That doesn't sound anything like a church to me.
No, that certainly doesn't sound like anything that comes out of any Bible that I've ever read. That's for sure.
So, Joe, going back to the remarks I made before we went to break about the difference between the Democratic playbook and the Republican playbook. You and I lived literally around the corner from each other. You were in Riverside. I was in Diamond Bar. So at the same time. So you and I lived. We lived one county apart.
Wow.
So I was right off the Diamond Bar Boulevard. And I had a business in Rancho Cucamonga, and was almost right to you in Riverside, halfway there.
Almost.
By the time I got to Ontario Airport, I was right around the corner.
Absolutely.
So there are vast differences in the Democratic playbook, which is the Marxist playbook. Always has been, and that calls for engagement on a daily basis. That means that every day you have workers in locations engaging people on the streets, engaging people in their homes, engaging people out of local offices, in community activism in a very overt way. And that is how the Democratic Party's machine has been operating since the 50s.
Right.
The Republican machine seems to operate very differently. And the get out the vote doesn't ever seem to be a problem for the Democrat Party. As you can see by the popular vote, always seems to be more on the Democratic side by several million people. It's a significant enough number that says that there is something that is compelling more people on the Democratic side to get out and vote than it is for people on the Republican side to get out and vote. Where are the power centers driving these two obviously different agendas? One very successful, and especially at the local, city, county, state level. One seemingly more effective off and on at the federal level.
Well, here's the thing, Eric, and this is something, we talked about this during the break a bit. What I'm afraid a lot of people don't really fully understand is where the power actually resides within a county party, okay? The Republican Party granted, you have the like the RNC and that, but when you get down to the county level, that's where the real uh, machinations take place. A good friend of mine who was mayor pro tem of Moreno Valley, California, and later ran for Congress. I ran his primary campaign. Um, he moved up to Alaska, and he was elected to the state legislature there several times. But he told me once that there's two things that you never want to see. One of them is sausage being made, and the other one is the internal dealings of a political campaign. And he could not be more correct. What a lot of people don't, I think, really don't fully understand, Eric, is that the real power in the party is at the county level, at something called the Central Committee. The Republican Party, when you look at it, when you separate Trump from the Republican Party, granted, Trump is what has held without Trump, if you were to separate Trump from that, what you would find is that the actual Republican Party is a very establishment driven party. And that establishment starts at the county level, at something called the Central Committee. And most counties have them. They might call them something else, but they're essentially the same things. They're the ones that drive the county apparatus within a particular county. They're the ones who generate support for the GOP in that particular county. And I can tell you, when I lived in Riverside, I was somewhat active in Republican Party politics, and I attended some of these Central Committee meetings. And I have to tell you, the level of disrespect that I felt was shown toward conservatives like myself, people who are concerned with things like abortion, social issues at the time mostly. Um, the level of condescension and disrespect that was shown to people, like me, and yes, me personally, astounded me to no end. It got to the point that there was a group of us who got together and ran a slate of candidates for the Central Committee based precisely upon the disrespect that we had seen within those Central Committee meetings. I mean, we're talking um, the kind of people you could imagine in a smoke-filled back room someplace, making deals over a hand of cards and a glass of bourbon or something. I mean, it really was kind of like that, And quite a few of these people actually got elected to the Central Committee because they recognized that, hey, this is where the real decisions are made. This is where we can decide which candidates want to get pushed and which ones really shouldn't be pushed, if you know what I mean. What what planks should be pushed in the Republican Party platform at the state level, at the federal level, and so on and so forth. And I would tell people, if you were to ask me what's the one thing that people can do to make a lasting impression within the Republican Party, I would tell them first thing first is to get a majority within your local Republican Party Central Committee, and then use that majority to start pushing the agenda, pushing the MAGA agenda, if you will, and making it part of the state and then eventually the federal level. Now, it would probably take 2 or 3 elections for this to happen, but eventually it could happen. It very well could happen. Um, there's no reason in my mind why conservative Republicans, people who believe, who want the MAGA agenda to go forward, the America First MAGA agenda, lower taxes, uh, pro business, pro life, pro freedom, pro Second Amendment, pro First Amendment, so on and so forth, pro Constitution, push that agenda at the local level and make sure that the candidates running for office for Congress and Senate and so forth, and state office, state legislatures, uh, you know, city councils, whatever the case may be, put their backing behind those candidates. In my view, I think that's what has to be done. It's got to be a grassroots effort. You can't rule from top down. It's got to be from the grassroots up. And the best place to start is with the county central committee. That's just my opinion.
It sounds like the Politburo. It sounds like, Soviet Union politics. It sounds like, but we know that Washington is run that way. That you can go to Washington as a farmer who got elected to county commissioner, who got elected to state legislature, that got elected to governor, and wound up is in the Senate. And it doesn't pay a lot of money to be a senator.
Right.
The salary is not great. I said, what is it, $68,000 or?
Yeah, something like that. More than I make.
Right, but it they come out as millionaires.
Right.
And it seems to be the path to wealth is through Washington.
Right. Right. When you take a look at who's backing these people, take a look at Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler probably makes more in campaign contributions from big tech than I make in an entire year. Okay, he gets that much probably in one campaign cycle, one election cycle, and then we've got these very same guys, after they give them thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars, or even if they don't do it directly, they'll use their PACs, they'll bundle it up, they'll get their employees to donate. I mean, what is it? Something like 99% of everybody in Silicon Valley donates to Democrats, for crying out loud. Why do you think we have the problems with Silicon Valley that we have? Okay, it's not because these lawmakers are stupid. Okay, well, you could argue that, probably debate that, I guess, but it's because of who pads their pocket. It's because of who puts the money in their campaign war chest, for crying out loud. And then they come back and they lobby them for this or that or whatever the case may be. I mean, good grief. If you or I, Eric, went before the Senate or went before the House, raised our hand, took an oath, tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God, under penalty of perjury, blah, 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 and we rattled off the kind of nonsense that Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and others from these companies have spouted off, only to find out within a matter of days, or if not hours, that everything that was said was a lie. Okay? You and I would be in jail. You know it. I know it. The rest of the country knows it. So why are these people allowed to walk around free? Okay? Why? Because they're the ones who pad the pocket of the people with power. That's why. That is exactly why. It's all about money, Eric. Follow the money. That's what it's all about.
Well, if you read the book of Isaiah, you read the great I wills. And Satan is speaking and said, if you choose me, if you vote for me, I will ascend to the throne of heaven. I will. And I have never seen a politician not make the statement that if you elect me for this office, I will. And every time I hear those words, I think of Satan making the claims, preposterous claims of things that he cannot deliver upon. And I think this was what scared Washington, was that Donald Trump came in for the first time and said, I will, and he did it.
Right.
And
Bingo.
he didn't care who he had to bully and push out of the way. He did it. Now, did he drain the swamp? He didn't. That has come back to bite him. And
Right. Well, you're absolutely right, Eric. I mean, Donald Trump was not a politician, okay? He's not one of them. He's not an establishment person, okay? He didn't run for office at the state or county level. He's never held office before. He's a businessman, all right? He can look at things just like you and I and say, wait a minute, that's wrong. Quit doing that, okay? And that's what this country has needed for so long, okay? The establishment didn't like that. You know what else they didn't like, Eric? They didn't like the fact that the people listened to Donald Trump and they supported what he was saying and they support what he did. That's what it's all about. He wasn't one of them. And how dare we, as rubes, how dare we elect someone like Donald Trump to the highest office in the land? How dare we? That's what this is all about.
America needs prayer, Joe. And this nation is on the brink of a cataclysmic shift and a reversal of great things, especially in the Middle East, especially in Israel. And if we are going to have allies like Turkey and Iran and rejoin the climate accord and crawl back in bed with those who are hell-bent to destroy America, then we have seen the enemy, and it is us. And it is something that is going to require intense prayer. And for those who are believers to rise up and lead and not be silent, but to take a stand and be vocal about their stand, that the American election system in the next 4 years must come under incredible scrutiny and review. There must be diligence in going back to a system that worked, where you were required to have a photo ID and you were required to be a registered voter and on the roster, and they took a ruler and a pen and they crossed your name out, and once it was crossed out, it was only there one time. And this is not an offensive process. And absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, you need to have a reason for an absentee ballot. You have a reason. I'm going to be able to, right. But because you don't feel like going to the polling place, okay, is not a reason. No. And we need to take the election system back again to make sure that this never happens again. Joe
Exactly.
Newby, Joe Newby, conservativefiringline.com, seen here on the first Monday of every month at the 12 o'clock hour. You can catch the replay on our YouTube channel or see it on conservativefiringline.com. Joe Newby and your family, we wish you a happy and healthy holiday, and we will see you again in the coming year. May God bless you and all the works of your hand.
Thank you, Eric, and may God bless you as well, and wish all the best for you this holiday season as well.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.